Hello everyone, so this time I would like to share a video on how to create a simple base for a flat shoe. For this method I will use just a regular closed default avatar, but of course you can use whichever avatar you have or you want to use. One thing to mention though, the shape of the shoe will depend on the shape of the foot. So if you have this type of wider foot but you want to create a narrow shoe or some specific shaped shoe, I would suggest you to adjust the shape of the foot in Blender or some other 3D modeling software. I have done it myself and I don't really have that much knowledge in how to use Blender, but the tools are quite simple. So to adjust the shape of the foot, you can do it very quickly and easily, and that will really help you to achieve very beautiful shape of the shoe too. Okay, so the first step is to create a simple rectangle pattern piece like this, and then I want to rotate it parallel to the ground, and for that I use Gizmo world coordinate. So this allows me to precisely rotate the pattern piece by holding down shift. As you can see, it kind of snaps every 45 degrees, so you can have the parallel position of the pattern piece parallel to the ground. Then I place the pattern piece right under the foot like this, and by pushing 0 I can see the bottom view, and I will change the fabric view to translucent. Okay, it looks pretty good. And to trace the shape of the sole, I will use the 3D pen for garment. This is really great tool, and once you select this tool, it will change the view of the fabric to the default one, but actually you can change it back to the transparent one. And by left click I start the line, and by holding down Control I can add curve points like this, and I will create a really simple shape for the sole. I'll make sure to follow more or less the outline of the foot so that the sole fits the foot. And once the line is created, you can use Edit 3D Pen to adjust the points. Of course, when you select it again, the view has changed, so you have to change it back to transparent. I usually don't do so much of fixing the points in this at this stage, because sometimes it's a bit difficult to move the points because it's difficult to grab them and then they kind of snap randomly to some random points, so I don't spend much time on this part. But you can also adjust the sole shape later on the pattern piece, because you can already see the line here, so I wouldn't spend too much time on it, but of course you can do that. When the line is finished, just right click on the line with the edit tool and convert to internal shape. So this function will already create the internal shape. And here what I will do, I will adjust this point because I don't want the edge like that. Okay, looks pretty good, I think. So I will cut it and delete the extra part. And I will freeze it and move it a little bit closer to the ground. So here, just be careful not to put it under the ground, because then you will have some collision issues. So just make sure it's above the ground like this. Okay, and I will also adjust the particle distance to 5. Actually, this line I don't really like. I think it's a bit wobbly, so I will delete a few curve points to make it more shaped like this. Yeah, looks more smooth. Okay, and I don't even need to simulate it. It's completely fine to just freeze it because the position is perfectly under the foot. And if you want to reduce the face count, you can change the mesh from triangles to quads. Okay, Now I will create the thickness of the sole. For that, I will use another pattern piece, but I like to split the sole in half, just because it's easier to understand the sewing and to arrange the pattern piece. So I create 2 pattern pieces at first, but of course you can just create 1. So first of all, measure this 306, and I will do 25 millimeter thickness, and this is 330 and 25. Okay. At this point, yeah, you have to be a little bit careful with the arrangement and sewing, because there's so much room for sewing things wrongly. So that's why I use arrangement points. So this is the longest piece, so it goes to the outline. So I arrange it here on this side and change it to flat. And this one goes inside. Okay. The sewing I will do in 3D because it's just less confusing. And you can be sure that you are creating the correct sewing. Okay. And now I simulate. And I will reduce particle distance to 5. Change this to quad as well. And also adjust the physical properties of the fabric. To achieve smooth shape, you should use quite stiff fabric. So I use trim hardware fabric as base, and then I increase the stretch values to 60 and bend values to 80. Of course, you can play around with these values. This really depends on what kind of look you want, but I think these are good values to start with. And once you change the fabric, of course, the sewing line angle now is on 180. So the software really tries to create a flat look here. So you can adjust that by changing fold angle to 90, and I also would suggest to increase the fold strength. And now you have the perfect angle here. Looks very smooth. And the last thing, I will merge the front. And on the back, if you want to make sure that this part doesn't create an edge for some reason, you can also increase the fold strength to maybe 50. So that will make the software work harder to have the flat simulation here. Okay, so I'm finished with that. Now I can freeze it. And now I will create the base. First, I will use the pattern of the sole to create the front part of the base. Whoa. Like this, I want just around this part. Okay. Cut and delete the unnecessary part. And have to do sewing. So this is outline goes here. Okay, and once I simulate, you can see this pattern piece lays very closely to the foot, and the shape is not very smooth. You can see the seams are like sticking out, the fingers are sticking out. Maybe that's the desired result, but we can also adjust it by increasing the length of this line. So let's say I will increase it to 13 centimeter. Just so that it's increased evenly, select direction both. And you can see now it already looks much smoother, and there's more space between the foot and the pattern piece. You can increase it more and more, really depends on the silhouette you want, but I will stop here. I think this is good enough. And now I will create the rest of the base. For that I will use the 3D pen for avatar, but before I do that, make sure you click on the foot and press F. That will put the rotation point here, so it will be easier to rotate around your foot. If you don't do that, the rotation point will be middle of the avatar, so you know it will be quite difficult to rotate around it. Rotate around the foot and zoom in. So again, click on the foot, press F, and let's start drawing on the avatar with 3D pen. I will just start from here, and I will create a really rough line because I think it's quite difficult to create like the perfect line on the avatar. So I usually just create a rough line and then I refine it once it's flattened as pattern piece. Okay, I have created the base, and now I change from 3D pen to flatten, select the area, press enter. Okay, and here is the pattern piece, and I can see the front part is flipped, so I will flip it. Okay. Now I will work on refining the shape. Just in case, I will clone this as reference line so that the original line I can still see after my adjustments. And I usually just delete all the unnecessary points. And when I create new points, I try to follow the original line. Okay, so here's a slight difference, so I will add 3.5. Okay, and I also need to sew this line to the base. Okay, and I will reduce particle distance. And here it is. I think the base of the shoe is pretty much done. Can also merge this if you want and work on some refinement. For example, you can adjust the fabric and make it even more stiff to have a smoother shape. You can adjust this pattern piece according to your design idea, or you can build the design on the top of this pattern piece. So just freeze it and start a new shape. So basically there are so many things you can do, and I think the most important thing is to get the base of the shoe very nice and smooth and have a good shape, and then you can do all kinds of adjustments. And several things to keep in mind. So fabric physical property, adjusting those, making the fabric stiffer or less stiff depending on what kind of look you want. Adjusting the fold angle of sewing, that can be helpful. For example, just removing fold strength and allowing the fold to be created naturally, that can also make a more relaxed and better line. Adding thickness, adjusting the curvature. There's so many things you can do. And one thing about this, so when you add thickness, because of the normal map of the seam, you will see this type of weird double kind of line thing happening. So this is because of the normal map of the sewing line. So usually I just remove it, and then you can get the cleaner look. And also there are one thing to consider, always remember to freeze certain elements. So for example, if you're working with the top, I would suggest to freeze the sole and the side piece, because if you unfreeze the side piece, of course the top part will start to interact with the side piece, so it might disturb the smoothness of it. So just be a little bit mindful here. Okay, so this is pretty much it. I hope this tutorial was useful, and I haven't done so much shoe design. I've created some really simple shoe just for fun, but actually it's such fun thing to do in CLO, and you can discover very interesting new ways of creating something. So I think definitely try out to design some shoe. Maybe you can select some shoe that you really like, that you have at home, and then you can try to make it in 3D. That's actually a really great way how to learn creating something in CLO. When I started, I used to take clothes that I have and I try to make them one-to-one in CLO. So the same thing I'm doing with shoes as well. So if you create any shoes based on this method, please feel free to let me know and show me the result. I would be really interested in seeing what kind of interesting designs you can come up with. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and if you have any comments or questions, please let me know, and have a good day. Bye.